Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching COVID-19 India Fights Back. I'm Frank Rausen Pereira. While COVID-19 is mainly spread by inhaling tiny droplets released when an infected person talks, coughs or sneezes, large droplets can also land on surfaces. A healthy person can then unknowingly touch those surfaces, and the next thing you know, the virus has gotten a free ride to wherever and whatever the person touches next. Often, people's hands can transport the viral particles to different surfaces, even the face, where it can enter your body through your eyes, mouth, or nose. In this edition of COVID-19 India Fights Back, we will analyze how long the coronavirus can survive on surfaces. Joining me on the program today are Dr. Anup Anvikar, Scientist F, ICMR, New Delhi; Dr. Anil, Gurtoo, Head, Department of Medicine, Lady Hardinge Medical College; and Rajneesh Bhardwaj, Associate Professor, Department of Mechanical Engineering, IIT Bombay. Thank you to all my guests for joining me in this edition of India Fights Back. All right, so Rajneesh Bhardwaj, I'd like to start the program with you first, because I understand that IIT Bombay has done a research on the survivability of the SARS-CoV-2 virus on various surfaces. So what is it that the study found? What were the salient features of the study?
So what we did, as you mentioned, there are two routes. One is the airborne route, where you have these tiny droplets can infect somebody, and there is another route which we call as a fomite route, in which the larger droplets, and then these droplets are on the order of like 100 micrometers, which is the width of your human hair, and these droplets fall on the surfaces, and they are barely visible by human eye, and you can touch it and get infected. So here in our work, we actually focused on the fomite route, and we looked at the evaporation time of these droplets. So there are several studies done before in the past, which actually have mentioned that the survival of the virus on a surface is linked to these tiny droplets. So virus itself is a tiny particle and genetic material, and it is on the order of nanometers, which is again like 1,000 times lesser than the human hair. But these droplets are slightly bigger, and they provide a medium or a hotbed, to survive them. So what we did, we actually looked at the effect of the ambient temperature and the contact angle, which is like the wettability of a surface, and the relative humidity. These factors we accounted for to kind of determine the survival time of these droplets. So we found that actually on the surfaces which are like less wettable, for example, your phone screen, which is less wettable as compared to the surface of the glass. So a droplet of water spreads quickly on a glass as compared to a phone screen. So on a phone screen, the virus will actually survive longer. It's, I think, 4 or 5 times longer than the glass surface. So that is one factor. The other factor was the ambient. If you start increasing the ambient temperature, the virus survival is lesser, because the drying time of the droplet is lesser. And then the relative humidity. The humidity is more. The droplet can actually survive more, and so the virus. So virus survival is actually linked to the droplet. And many times these droplets become tiny and they are hardly visible, but there's still the virus is there. So that's what we found. And there are several studies have come out, I think around 3 since March, which actually have studied the actual concentration of virus, so-called virus titer, on different surfaces, for example, cardboard and stainless steel and glass. And they have shown actually the virus survival is actually linked from 4 to all the way to 28 days. So the recent study from Australia actually have talked of this long survival times. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. So we'll go into some of these other aspects that you brought up about humidity, temperature, and survivability as far as the Australian study is concerned in just a bit. But let me go across to the other panelists as well. So Dr. Anup, as far as this particular strain of virus, or this particular virus, coronavirus, is concerned, it's been around for about a year now. But there's very little information that we know, and the information too is constantly changing. What is it that we know about the virus for sure, and why is it that it's taking so long to completely understand this particular virus?
Well, as far as the survivability of the virus is concerned, as Rajneesh rightly pointed out, it depends on various factors like temperature, surface, then the humidity. And if we talk about the Australian study, well, that study was conducted under a controlled temperature, under a controlled environment. So those timelines for the survivability of the virus on the surfaces, as far as they are concerned, means they may not be true in the real life as such. And they have also quoted in their paper that in if the ambient temperature is more, then the survivability will definitely be less. And as far as the transmission is concerned, it is going on. We all know there are various other factors responsible. It is quickly transmitting from one person to another.
Okay. So, Dr. Anil, let me bring you into the picture now. So, how is this particular virus different from other coronaviruses? Because it's not the only coronavirus around. What is it that we've learned from the other coronaviruses, and how is this the SARS-CoV-2 virus different from the others?
Others, let's say there are two broad groups. This is a beta coronavirus. There are alphas and betas also, which have been circulating in our environment for more than a decade. The four of them, which together constitute the common cold viruses, seasonally active, and create just common cold, nothing more. Those are the four. And then the two of these three, the SARS-1 and which came in 2002-3, and the MERS which came in 2012-13, and now we have upon us this since December 31st, 2019, the SARS-CoV-2. So what we know, one, there is like if we study the behavior from what we have learned of the behavior of the ones that have been with us the longest, the four alpha and beta types, which cause common cold. And one of them has been dated as far back as 1890, the pandemic flu pandemic of 1890, which probably was caused by one of those which have today transformed into just common endemic episodic seasonal colds. So they have been, all the four are very exquisitively sensitive to ultraviolet sunlight, temperature, and humidity, as has just been mentioned. So these are the three environmental factors which together create a sensitivity of these viruses in terms of survivability on any surface anywhere in the environment. One. The second thing that is new, probably new for this SARS-CoV-2, is its capacity to create super spreading events. That is 10 to 12% of actually infected and infectious people account for almost 70 to 80% of infections and transmissions in any setting, super spreading. So it follows that 10, 20, 80 law, 10 to 20% accounting for 80%. So that has resulted in a very unique and distinguishing feature of this pandemic, sudden emergence of clusters out of nowhere. The whole family, the families around, everyone's suddenly infected and it emerges as a cluster. And around, it's all an island of sea of peace, and a sudden island erupts. So this kind of a clustering related to the so-called super spreading events is something new to this virus, not seen with the earlier forms to the extent we know as of today. That is new. The question before us raised by these studies, which are very meaningful scientific studies, as said, done under controlled conditions of temperature and humidity, and even Australian study, I think, even eliminated the sunlight and was carried out in complete darkness. So the question before us as a clinician is, how much does this survivability in lab conditions translate into transmissibility under real life conditions? That is the key question before us. And that is where we clinicians have to get into partnership of interaction with the scientists and come to study this question of survivability and transmissibility leading to the clinical outcomes.
I think that's a very valid point that you've raised, and I think I'm going to take that particular aspect forward with the other panelists as well. So Rajneesh, Bhardwaj, let's talk about the aspect of temperature, environment, and all those aspects really as far as transmission and survivability is concerned of this particular virus. Let's not forget, summer is now turning to winter as well. Does that mean that the virus can survive longer times during the winter and we have to be more cautious now going forward?
I think it's a very good question. So first, let's talk about one by one. So if you have the effect of temperature, so if the temperature is very large, we are operating, let us say, at 40 degrees Celsius in a peak summer, the droplets in which the virus is surviving or the medium in which the virus is surviving, for example, water spread on the surface, these film going to evaporate or the droplet going to evaporate very fast. So the survivability reduces. On the other hand, once you have winter, you have low temperature, but it has been shown that the virus surviving also in a low temperature. For example, what happened in New York? It was a winter time or spring time, and then there was super spreading expanse all over. And in that temperature also, you have this virus which actually kind of become like a fatty virus, in the sense that it has a lipid layer. That lipid layer kind of find a conducive medium not to degrade itself. That is like a cold temperature. So the two extreme temperatures, the virus seem to survive more rather than somewhere in between. So if you have an optimum temperature, let us say 40 or 35, the film kind of dries up and the survivability is lesser. On the other hand, if you start to coming colder, you start to have more survival. That is the effect of the temperature. In the context of relative humidity, the droplets are not evaporating as fast as they could. For example, you can think of monsoon season. When you have monsoon, so these mediums keep thriving. So that's why the bacteria, the pathogens, and these viruses, even coronavirus, they actually survive in a higher humid environment. So that is the effect of humidity. And the third effect, as doctor mentioned, that the ultraviolet light. This is also like a very important effect. It has been shown very early on in March, April that as you expose these droplets or the virus to the ultraviolet light, it kind of dies out. And as the Australian study is showing, in absence of the ultraviolet light, the virus actually survives to 28 days. So these are the three factors which kind of important. And as you rightly asked, the winter is coming and we have to be actually more careful. So first thing, of course, is the temperature, and the second thing is the pollution or these suspended particulate, in the air. So that also is kind of helping the virus to thrive. So in fact, if you talk of now airborne transmission, these pollutants and this PM 2.5, they're actually helping virus or these droplets to hang on, and then the chances of infection is going to increase. So the winter is something, we don't know what will happen, but it is likely that the spreading or the infection will further increase as compared to what we have seen recently.
Absolutely. So it's good to be cautious and move ahead with extreme precaution. And that's what the government has also been talking about. There have been, a new campaign has been started now, asking people, not to let their guard down and telling them that follow all the protocols and safety guidelines really as far as going out and as far as coronavirus is concerned. All right. So Dr. Anup, as far as several of these studies are concerned, we've been talking about the Australian study now. They've been talking about how coronavirus can survive on a banknote for up to 4 weeks. Initially there were some reports that came out that said that the virus can survive on surfaces only for about 2 to 14 hours. Now that has changed to 4 weeks. So we constantly seem to be changing, this particular aspect of it. Why is that so?
Yeah. As days progress, new research is being carried out, and definitely we are getting new data, and our knowledge is increasing with that. In a way, it is good. Research must go on. And as far as this banknotes thing is concerned, again, what I would say that 28 days timeline, it is in a controlled laboratory setting. That's what is mentioned in that paper. So, and if we talk about the Indian conditions, we definitely do not have that kind of temperatures and the humidity which was maintained in the laboratory. So that could be on a higher side if we consider our conditions. But yes, definitely it will serve. It might survive on the banknotes for a few days, and that is definitely worrisome. But then, to save, to protect ourselves, we should differentiate between what is clean and what is dirty. What is there inside my house, I know that is clean, so that is clean. Rest everything is dirty. And whenever I touch anything other than which is clean, I should wash my hands and take all the necessary precautions. If I cannot wash my hands, I can definitely use a sanitizer, and we should not touch our face without that. So precautions, they should be taken at all the times. And as you rightly said, we should not lose our guard. In fact, we need to protect ourselves more.
Absolutely. And Dr. Anil, as far as survivability is concerned, I was just doing some reading earlier in the day. It said a few research articles said that the virus doesn't survive as long on a copper surface as, for instance, the surface of a mobile phone or a banknote. Why is that so? Why is it that the virus, behaves differently on different surfaces? And does the surface also matter at the end of the day, and not just the temperature and humidity and the atmosphere or the environment?
Oh, yes. So copper is different slightly because of the atomic, that has to do with the atomic structure of copper atom, which disintegrates the lipid. However, keeping copper aside, it is a very unique atomic structure which destroys the virus faster than the other metals like steel. Steel, it survives longer, and steel has been used as a gold standard to check for virus survivability. However, we can divide these fomites, these surfaces, into two broad groups to get an idea, a sense of where are we heading by the current research standards. One is the porous surfaces of fomites, porous, like cotton, cloth, porous, and non-porous, like metal, barring copper, other metals, glass, vinyl surfaces, plastics. And in a way, if you look at our entire day-to-day civilizational social behavior, then we are moving within a bubble composed of only three things: glass, steel, and plastic. They define our civilization in material terms. Wherever we move, we are encased in one of these or bubbles: glass, steel, plastic. So it is of concern, however, that its survivability. The other thing is, however, that concern itself is less important to me as a clinician than the fact that if every one of us or majority of us follow those four principles of maintaining a mask, which means I don't throw out a shower of droplets which would land upon any surface so that way I'm diminishing the amount of load of droplets coming on fomites. One, so I'm wearing a mask itself, if everyone does that. Two, we can't sanitize notes and we can't go on cleaning everything. So we clean our hands, which is easier to do and individually within our controls. I can't go and sanitize the whole steel and glass facade, but I have a control over my hands. So I can keep washing my hands, soap and water. And when traveling where soap and water is inaccessible, I must carry with me a small bottle of 70%, 60 to 70% ethyl alcohol, with which I must rub my hands for 30 seconds, 20 to 30 seconds, whenever I have touched any frequently touched surface. That behavior should become automatic. So it's a question of individual behavior change apart from the larger social change. So the individual behavior change has to focus on just three things. And if we do that, we are protected against all the threats as signaled by this new research of surface survivability. One, washing our hands, not the notes. Forget the notes. Let the notes be contaminated. If I wash my hands before and after counting and touching, I am safe. Two, wearing a mask, which means I decrease the load of droplets that land up upon fomites around me. And three, the behavior. Avoid touching this T-zone, the eyes, the nose, and the mouth, the so-called T-zone. It looks like a T, impressionistically speaking. So avoid touching it, which we habitually, by habit, we are conditioned to touch 15 to 16 times in an hour. So that has to become a practice, a behavior. And then, of course, is the issue of cough and sneeze etiquette. When I cough or sneeze, I do it either in the bent elbow or carry with me some handkerchief or some tissue. So these are behaviors. If we restrict and follow these behaviors, restrict to them and follow these behaviors, we need not be too alarmed or get into any panic over the findings of surface survivability, because we have cut down the transmissibility, and that's in the end, that's all that matters as far as the clinical expression of COVID goes. It might survive, it still does not transmit to me and to others because of these 4 or 5 simple behaviors. If we do that, we need not be alarmed, whatever the new research says that way.
Absolutely. All right, time to get closing comments now from all my panelists with the best way forward. Rajneesh, Bhardwaj, starting first with you.
Yes, so I would like to agree with doctor that first of all, we should take this finding with a pinch of salt. This 28 days, 14 days, of course, these are controlled laboratory conditions. In a realistic scenario, how much virus, which still can infect me, or how much viable virus is there, we don't know. So this is something more of a academic study rather than a realistic scenario. And between the surfaces, we can judiciously choose to touch the surfaces which are frequently touched versus not so frequently touched. For example, the virus survivability is kind of not so strong on the cardboard or the paper or the tissue as compared to steel and the glass. So we can kind of take a think of the surfaces which can infect us, and we should avoid them touching. And as doctor said, we should also use disinfectant to clean those surfaces and sanitizers for ourselves, and avoid touching our T-shape. That's a very good term, and that way we can actually be safe. And as the temperature is changing, we don't know what will happen in winter, but we should be actually ultra careful to take all the precaution and not let the guard down. Thank
Dr. Anup, and also, what has the virus taught us so far?
Yeah. So there are viruses since long time. Means if not novel coronavirus, other viruses will be there, and there are viruses all around all the different surfaces. But we should try to protect ourselves, and we should take all the necessary precautions. And as far as the banknotes is concerned, India is going for digital payment, so that is the better way of avoiding the banknotes. But then yes, whenever we come in contact with banknotes or we are counting the notes, we should wash our hands after that.
All right, and Dr. Anil, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
I would say we'll have to put a perspective to a practical perspective to the new findings that have emerged over survivability on surfaces for long duration. That is essentially framed by 2 key messages. One, there is nothing new that should cause any alarm, undue alarm or panic when we handle anything, provided we do the second thing, wash our hands frequently before and after frequently touch fomites or spaces. 1, 2, wear a mask. 3, use the etiquette, cough and sneezing etiquette of a tissue or a cotton or some handkerchief or just a bent elbow to reduce the transmission loads. And of course, the last thing is, of course, the social distancing of 2 meters or 6 feet. If we do these behaviors and do them consistently and make a habit out of them, there is nothing to fear. We can lead a normal life, regardless of what these studies tell us in a practical sense of the way.
Okay. All right. On that note, then, I'll call it a wrap on this edition of COVID-19 India Fights Back. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. And before we leave, we'd like to make an appeal to all our viewers. Remember, COVID-19 is still here and it's here to stay. Wash your hands regularly, your face as well regularly, and maintain social distancing. This is the only way that we can defeat coronavirus as of now.